Click on that. Okay. That side looks good. Oh. Oh no, cowlick. Alright. Oh. That's a good finger pop. Okay. For those of you that watch after the fact, this will be a practice video where I go through 4 FRQs from AP Classroom that cover the topics of GDP, both the nominal and real GDP. Oh, I need to mute myself. Oh no, cowlick. There we go. Sorry, I can see my video playing in the background. So we're going over GDP, CPI, and unemployment rate. This is going to cover formulas for things like nominal and real GDP, as well as the GDP deflator, CPI and inflation rate, and then unemployment rate and the labor force participation rate. So this is probably the most math-intensive part of the course. There was a formula sheet for this unit just on its own when I taught it in my course. So I'm going to go through a bunch of formulas when I'm doing this. It's a good idea to write down any formula I use on any of these problems. One of these problems also does touch on the multiplier effect, the spending multiplier and the tax multiplier, which is technically a thing from the next unit, but it's still math, so I think it's good for us to just cover it here, because let's just knock out as much math as possible. So this is going to be our most math-heavy of these review FRQ videos. Again, I'm going to go through 4 FRQs here in their entirety, talking my way through it. Do I need the song playing so you guys can see what song of the day is? Let's go with, I'm going to mute it first. Let's do... that's a good one. All right. Yeah, Kenneth. I saw that there weren't really... I mean, there are exams, but I don't think there were that many that you guys could have possibly had today. It was Spanish Lit, Chem, and Physics 1. I don't know if Physics 1 is the senior one. Lindsay, good to see you. What's up, guys? But yeah, this is going to be a lot of math. So if you forgot how to do the math stuff, this for second semester kids, this was the unit we did right before we went on break. So there was a whole bunch of math in that unit that we had to do with formulas that you had to memorize because you weren't going to be able to use a formula sheet on the AP exam or a calculator, except now you can use both. So ha ha ha! So make sure that when I'm doing the formulas here, you either jot them down in your journal or you find the formula sheets that are on my Moodle, and I'd recommend printing those off for when you take the exam. One of those 2 options. It's not a bad idea to write them down though, because then you remember them better, which is probably the right way to do it. Because if you memorize the formulas, then you don't have to look them up. That kind of thing. So I'll be touching on a whole bunch of stuff here. If you have questions, again, feel free to ask them during the chat. Graduation, there was an email that went out today with some more information for graduation. Not really how it's going to run, but more like what do you guys do? Show up an hour before if you're parents and faculty. Students get more detailed instructions because you usually have to show up a little bit before that to get you like in the right order. You guys will park in a specific place. Your parents and family will park in another place. So check that email for like parking instructions and stuff like that. And you'll need a ticket to get in. I think they're going to send out tickets digitally, I would assume, for you and for your family. So make sure that you guys have that stuff ready to go. And again, that's the 26th, which is a Tuesday. It's the Tuesday after graduation. Or Tuesday after next week. So yeah. Again, I'll be going through these FRQs here in a couple minutes, but I'll hold off for now until then. I'm trying to think of anything else that's worth mentioning or noting for the course. I'm trying to think. Super Saturdays on Saturday. I put an email out for that. Tomorrow we'll be going over this week's practices. That's the last practice video we have to do because next week you won't have any assignments. You'll have like one survey that the school's asking you to fill out. So you won't have any like homework assignments next week. And this week I'm really like being fairly like lax about it. Just if you have any missing stuff, the only thing is to make sure you get that to me by Tuesday because that's when we have to finalize grades for seniors. Is this upcoming Tuesday. So if you got missing work, take care of it. And again, granted, if you've got like 8 turned in assignments and 1 missing, I'm not going to make you fail for the quarter. Basically, as long as your grade averaged out to above a 70, which P's are 100s and missings are 0s, then you're fine. What's up, Arch? Archer's here. He's just hanging out next to me. Ball. Archer. What? What? Okay. Let's put that right there. Yes. What? Why are you staring at me? Parker, what's up? And Parker, thanks for using the discussion board. Appreciate it. It's good to see those questions in there because I could tell that you were working on that FRQ ahead of time. And that's an FRQ that is kind of tricky. There's some things there that like, is that count? Does that count? The two ones you asked about were the two ones that I want to say, what was the hit chance on? I think 60% of students missed the rent one you asked about, and then 97% of students missed the commissions one. So those two that you asked about were like spot on, tough. And I'm going to go over those in tomorrow's video for those of you that know what I'm talking about or don't know what I'm talking about. It's part of the homework for this week. Parker asked about it in the discussion board. But you guys can see that, I think, if you go onto Moodle and use the discussion board. All right, it is 2 o'clock on my end, so I'm going to start this video. This is an AP Macro FRQ review over Unit 2 for GDP, CPI, and unemployment. This is the math stuff. This is not really that graph intensive, and none of these questions barely touch on graphs in any way, shape, or form. It's not that these questions are not likely this year, it's just that I don't think they're as likely as they normally would be because a lot of them can be solved with simply busting out a formula and plugging and chugging numbers in. A couple of these would be tricky to do, just because it's going to be based around a couple of things like, do you know it's in GDP or not? But for the most part, these should be fairly doable questions for you if you have a formula chart with you. Yeah, no worries, Parker. But even if that's not the case, it's still important to make sure that you're setting up everything right and plugging numbers in properly, and you know what formulas to use and when to use them. So it's still a useful video. And there's a couple of times when the formulas don't always line up. Like there's more than one way to find real GDP. There's more than one way to find nominal GDP. So you might be trying to force a formula in a problem where it actually isn't appropriate. So you've got to be careful with that when it comes to some of the math in AP Macroeconomics. But with all that being said, let's get into it. And just like yesterday, I put these FRQs and I assigned them to you on AP Classroom. So if you want to go back later, like prior to the exam or something, and open these up and sort of work through them yourself and then open this video up and check your answers, feel free to do so. I assigned it as FRQs for Unit 2 for the live stream on 5/14, which is today. So it should be labeled in such a way that you can tell, like, oh, okay, it's this. And yesterday's were also posted on AP Classroom. And again, it's just 4 FRQ problems, so maybe you do 1 or 2 of them and just check with the video to see how you're doing. Cool. And don't do that now. This is just for after. So with everything, here we go. We've got, and my face is in an okay spot here. Yeah, I'll move it up. Okay. So we've got this table. It's got spending on final goods in billions of dollars by consumers, businesses, and the government in a country with no international trade. That last part's kind of weird, but outside of that, I think this is a problem that we should be able to deal with. Our aggregate variables, just meaning the big categories, and the dollar value in billions of dollars in the base year. In the base year means that this GDP, this like dollar value will work for nominal or for real GDP in that year because it's always using the base year's prices. So this will work for nominal or real GDP. Consumer spending, does that count towards GDP? Yes, so this would count towards GDP. Investment spending, does that count? Yes. Government spending, does that count? Yes. Transfer payments, does that count? And this is, again, things like welfare, unemployment benefits, stuff like that. Does that count towards GDP? No. Because it is what's referred to as a non-production transaction. Remember that there are some things that do and don't count towards GDP. GDP is meant to be the dollar value of spending on final goods and services in your economy in a year. Well, transfer payments, nothing is being produced there. You're just giving people money for no service or good. Again, being unemployed isn't like a service that you're providing for anybody. So transfer payments do not count towards your GDP. Other things that don't count would be the sale of like used goods, the sale of intermediate goods, which are like the components. Nick, good to see you. Haven't had Nick in here for a bit. But good to see you, Nick. I'll grab my expo markers because I want to do some math. Just want to come say hi. That's fine. I'll take that. And then it also tells me that the MPS is 0.4 and that there are no exports or imports. So let's just say that XN, oh, that's a good looking X, XN equals 0. There's no net exports, which is fine. It just makes the formula for GDP a little bit easier. So MPS is 0.4. That just tells me, okay, the multiplier stuff's going to come into play here at some point. And there's no imports or exports, so don't worry about that. Okay. Calculate the real GDP in this country, show your work. So this is one of those times where you want to bust out the real GDP formula, and you're like, it's nominal over the deflator times 100. Wait, what the hell is the deflator here? I have no idea. Cool. You don't have to do that. The reason why is that this is in the base year. which means this is in the year that we are comparing everything to, and in your base year, your nominal and real GDP are the same thing, which means you're actually just finding nominal GDP. And the way you do that is a couple of ways, but in this case, the way that I would do it, because it's based on the numbers that you're given, is that GDP equals, and this is actually the same formula for our aggregate demand, C plus I plus G plus XN, which, hey, we've got those. We've got C, I, G, and XN. So I'm just going to do 900 plus 400 plus 200 plus 0. So this is 900 plus 600, which is just $1,500. Now, when you're doing that problem, when you're showing your work, I would write this formula and I would just plug in numbers. That's it. That's all you would be required to do for showing work. Just write this formula and then plug in 900 plus 400 plus 200 plus 0, or just don't include plus XN because it's not, there are no imports or exports. That would also have been fine, I think. So 1,500 is my answer there. Calculate the MPC. Well, MPS is 0.4, so my MPC is 0.6, but if I had to show work for that, what I would do is that MPC plus MPS equals 1. And then I would plug in, okay, x plus 0.4 equals 1, x equals 0.6. Like that's, when you're showing work on a math problem, write the formula, plug in the formula, solve. That's all you really need to do in a math problem. Okay, C, suppose the government increases spending from 200 billion to 300 billion. So government spending goes up by, there's an increase in G of $100 billion, right? They've ramped it up by 100 billion. Calculate the maximum change in real GDP and then the maximum level of the new equilibrium real GDP. Interesting. So, what's my maximum change in real GDP? Well, if we increase government spending by 100 billion, and whenever you hear maximum change, you've got to start thinking multiplier effect. That's a key word that maximum ties into the multiplier. The multiplier effect formula was always, there's this change in spending times the multiplier that'll equal your change in GDP. I am solving for the change in GDP here because it asked for the change in real GDP. That's nominal or real, it doesn't matter here because I used real up here. My change in spending was 100 billion, I already have that, right? My multiplier is 1 over the MPS, and 1 over MPS in this case is 1 over 0.4. And if you're not that good at math, it's okay. 1 over 0.4 is the same as doing 10 divided by 4, which you're like, I still don't love that. It's like, okay, cool, but like 10 divided by 4, if you were to simplify the fraction, is 5 over 2. What's 5 divided by 2? Most of you should be able to realize, oh, like 2.5? And that's correct. 0.4 goes into 1 2.5 times, because 2 times 0.4 is 0.8, and then a half of 0.4 is 0.2, so 2.5 times 0.4 would equal 1. So my multiplier is 2.5. So I know my change in spending is 100 billion, my multiplier is 2.5, so 100 times 2.5 equals $250. That would be my change in GDP. And this is in billions, technically. $250 billion is the change in GDP. And then given my change in real GDP from part CI, which is this, what's the maximum level of equilibrium real GDP? And you're like, what the hell does it mean by equilibrium? Well, our real GDP was 1,500. This happens, what's my new GDP? Well, my new GDP is now 1,750. And again, this is in billions. For all these were in billions. Technically, it's 1,750,000,000,000, blah, 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 blah. What I just did there was I just added 1,500 plus 250, because real GDP is going to go up by 250. Okay, well, my real GDP was 1,500, so it's just that plus that, so 1,750. This is one of those problems where you guys could really easily overthink it and be like, wait, do I do 1,500 times the multiplier? It's like, no, that wasn't a change in spending, that's just the amount of spending that's going on. What's the new equilibrium? This was my original equilibrium GDP. So my new equilibrium would be the new one, which is combining this new thing into your pre-existing. And this is also billions, if you weren't aware. The last part, D, suppose that taxes decrease by 100 billion. Okay. Would the maximum change in real GDP be larger than, smaller than, or equal to the change in real GDP identified in part CI? You can do the math for this if you want. The formula for this, technically, and I can fit it, I think, is change in taxes times the tax multiplier equals the change in GDP. So they decrease taxes by 100 billion. The tax multiplier, in case you forgot, which is possible. I'm just writing down every formula I'm using here so that you guys can copy them down. My tax multiplier is negative MPC over MPS. That is, I'm just gonna rewrite that because that's so hard to read. There it is. Negative MPC over MPS, which again in this case is negative 0.6 over 0.4. You might hate that, but you can just get rid of the decimal. Negative 0.6 over 0.4 is the same as doing negative 6 over 4. And that's just 1.5 or 1.5. In this case, it's negative 1.5. So when I'm plugging numbers into this formula right here, what I should be plugging in is negative 100 billion, because they decrease taxes by 100 billion, times negative 1.5, because that's what my tax multiplier would end up being, would equal my change in GDP, which means that my change in GDP would be 150 billion, because 100 times 1.5 is 150. It's a negative times a negative, so it's a positive. Now, compared that to my answer in part CI, well, when I did part CI, that led to a change in GDP of 250 billion. In this case, it only increases GDP by 150 billion. That is smaller than. Now, you're not required to do math on that problem. This is a thing that has come up every time I've done a multiplier FRQ because they like to ask this question, which is, hey, when you do a tax change, is that going to do the same effect, less of an effect, or a bigger effect than if you change spending? And the answer every time, always, and this is a rule, this is like a logical rule, is that when you change taxes as opposed to changing spending, if you change them by the same amount, the change in taxes is going to have less of an impact. It's going to result in a lesser change in GDP. It's going to be less impactful. The reasoning there is when you change taxes, a portion of that change in taxes people will save. They'll hold on to. That's not bad. It's just not going to help GDP go up, right? GDP is a measure of our spending and production, so when people save money, that hurts it. So when you change taxes, people save a portion of the change in taxes and spend the rest of the portion. Okay, when you change spending, that's a change in spending, all of that money gets spent. All of that goes into GDP. So that's hugely impactful for your GDP when you change spending. When you change taxes, it's less impactful because people save a portion of it. So the answer will always be smaller than if they change taxes in GDP by the same, and if they change taxes in spending by the same amount, the change in taxes will always be less impactful than the change in spending because people save a portion of that tax. That is a good rule to write down if you haven't ever written it down for this. But those are my answers to these problems: 150, 1750, 250, 0.6, 1500. This is all math. For part D, you could have done the math, or you could have explained it verbally, or you could have done both if you're trying to just flex on everybody. But one of the two would have worked. So if you weren't sure how to explain that logically, just do the math. You got a formula for that, go for it. That's pretty doable. Questions over first question? I don't think so. Let me check the YouTube channel, see if I'm seeing anything different on my end here. No. Okay, cool. The focus is dropping a little bit. That's interesting. Not sure why that's happening. Oh, my girlfriend's on a call. That's probably why. She's doing a teaching thing too right now. Might be dropping my bandwidth. Okay. All right. Moving on to the next question. Next question. This is much more geared towards unemployment. And I think this question we've done one time on this channel before, but that would have been probably like a month ago at this point, if not more than a month ago. So it's worth doing it again. So we've got working age population information. We've got 30,000 that aren't in the labor force, meaning they're not actively trying to work. We've got 63,000 that are employed, meaning they are trying to work and have a job. Good for them. And you've got a total of 7,000 unemployed. 4,000 of them are cyclically unemployed. Cyclical unemployment is unemployment caused by a recession. So this economy is in a recession. Frictional unemployment, which is unemployment caused by movement, whether that's moving between careers or moving between places or moving from stages of life, like when you're moving from college to the workforce. If you're unemployed for a period of time, you're frictionally unemployed. This is seen as healthy unemployment. And structural unemployment, which is when people no longer fit into the structure of the economy, meaning their skills are kind of obsolete. They're not particularly useful in the given context of the economy. Again, I mentioned things like a VHS repairman or a DVD repairman, or kind of even Blu-ray, because who the hell even uses Blu-ray? Like, those are not particularly useful jobs. So this is all just information that I know already. Things that I know off the top of my head before I've done any question or answered anything yet. Things I should be able to figure out is 7,000, 63,000, 30,000. Okay, the population is 100,000. I just added up everything. This entire country has 100,000 people. Okay, 63,000 of them are employed. 30,000 of them are not trying to work. Does not mean they're unemployed. They're not unemployed. If they're not in the labor force, they do not count. So I know this already. Good to know total population. Calculate the unemployment rate for country Z. Show your work. So what does unemployment rate equal? So, oh god, that's way too big. Let's do this. This is meant to be a U, not a V. Disclaimer. This is UR, unemployment rate, equals number of unemployed. I'm going to put unemp. Should be able to figure that out. Number of unemployed over number in the labor force times 100. This is a formula people tend to forget, and this bottom part is what they tend to screw up every time. This happens a lot. It's like people would go and be like, okay, the unemployment rate in this economy is 7%, because 7,000 over 100,000, so 7% of the people in this economy are unemployed. That's not what unemployment rate means. Unemployment rate is the percentage of the labor force, the percentage of people who are actively trying to work that do not have a job right now. Because again, you wouldn't want to count like babies and elderly people who retire when you're talking about unemployment rate. Those people aren't trying to work. Austin, good to see you. So when I'm doing this formula, make sure that you have this formula down. This is unemployment rate, number of unemployed over number in labor force times 100. For this, the math is pretty easy. My number of unemployed people is 7,000. We've already got that. Well, who the hell is in the labor force? Well, this one's kind of easy to logically deduce, is if these people aren't in the labor force, I guess who's in it? Everybody else. People are like, how do I figure out the labor force? It's like, it's everyone who's not in the labor force. If you're not in the labor force, then you're not. Cool. Then everybody else would be in the labor force. Oh, okay. So what my math should get me to is 7,000, that's the number of unemployed, over 70,000, because everybody else is the labor force. Labor force is employed and unemployed people. It's everyone who's trying to work. And unemployed people are trying to work. That's why they're unemployed and not in the labor force. So it's 7,000 over 70,000. That math is easy still, because you get to 7 over 70, which simplifies down to 1 over 10. So this is just 10%. So again, when you're solving to show your work, write the formula, plug in the numbers, and then put the answer. They're not going to make you solve 7,000 over 70,000, like writing out like a long division thing. They don't care about that. They just want to know, 1, did you know the formula? Good. 2, did you know the numbers to put in the formula? Because that matters, especially in this context. You could easily mess that up. And then 3, did you get the right answer? So 10% done. If you show your work wrong, they won't give you the point, that kind of thing. Like, they don't want you to luck into 10%. They don't want you to be like, I don't know, 10, frick it, I don't know. Like, yeah, they don't want that. So show your work, do it properly. It's 10% though. Labor force participation rate. Okay, well, what's that? LF. R is how I'm going to abbreviate that. That's on, neither of these are like acceptable abbreviations. I'm just saving time. So the labor force participation rate is, can we read this with my giant head in the way? What it means definition-wise is the percentage of the total population that is actively trying to work. So it's number in LF over total population. And again, as these are all rates, you're always going to throw a times 100 at the end of it because you want to make it like not 0.24, it should be 0.4, something like that. So the number in the labor force, we've already gone over that. That's 70,000. And the total population I already wrote down up at the top was 100,000, because that's just everybody. And 70,000 over 100,000 is 70 over 100, which is really easily 70%. Boom. And again, write the formula, plug in numbers, move on with your life. It's math problems on this AP exam should take you basically no time, unless you get stuck on like, wait, what formula do I use? And in that case, when you're wondering, look at what numbers you're given. Look at what data you're given. I'm given unemployed, I'm given employed, I'm given not in labor force. I can figure out total population from there. Okay, I can figure out basically any type of unemployment versus labor force rate. All of those are fair game for me here. Next thing, is country Z producing at its potential real output? Potential real output is your natural rate of output. Is it producing at our natural rate of output? Is this economy at full employment? That's another way of asking it. Is this economy at full employment? The answer is no. And it's not because it has unemployment, it's because specifically it has this. Cyclical unemployment. No, because there is cyclical unemployment. And again, cyclical unemployment is unemployment caused by periods of time like a recession. So this is telling me, oh, this economy is not at full employment. If this was zero, these two existing is fine. You're allowed to have these two and be at natural rate of output. Okay, those two are the healthy unemployments that any economy should have if they're doing everything properly. So these two existing, totally fine, not a problem. The fact that cyclical exists, that is the issue, and that's why we're not at full employment. Last part, assuming constant opportunity costs, draw a correctly labeled graph of their PPC, showing consumer goods on the horizontal, capital goods on the vertical, and label a point W that represents the current level of unemployment. This is a question that showed up on one of our FRQs. I think it was on an FRQ test, actually. People were like, yay, an easy one. So it says constant opportunity costs. That is important. They might have taken off a point for this. I'm not sure if they did on this exam or not. But constant opportunity costs based on yesterday's video, my graph should look like that. That is meant to be a straight line with no hiccups. That is just because I'm using a mouse, so apologies. I've got consumer goods. I'm just going to put con. Capital goods, cap. Then the current point W, that represents the current level of unemployment. Well, we're in a recession, so we're currently inside the curve. So this is the answer to part D. And again, constant opportunity cost means straight line. If it's increasing opportunity costs, it's a bowed-out curve. You won't see decreasing opportunity costs because that's not mathematically or logically possible in this context. Okay? Question 2, any problems with that? And again, this is one that's geared mostly towards unemployment rate. The important things to know about unemployment are who counts, and generally speaking, as long as you don't have a job but are looking or were recently laid off, you count towards unemployment rate. And this is for at least a month. You typically have to be in these categories, although laid off can be more recent than that. There are different categories of unemployment, like structural, frictional, and cyclical. Those ones you do need to know the definitions of because they do matter for things like C on this. It matters that you know that cyclical is the one that's really bad. That if you have that, then you're in a recession. Like, you need to know that. So those are some things to know about unemployment rate. The last thing is to make sure you know are those two formulas right there. So if you don't know them off the top of your head, write them down in your journal, in your notes, somewhere. Write these down, or make sure that they're on that formula sheet, because I'm not sure this one is. Now, labor force participation rate is one that I think a lot of you guys could figure out from context clues of like, it's labor force over something. What could, population probably? Like, this means like how many people are participating in the labor force. So out of the total population, people are trying to work. Yeah, that would make sense. My chair's being extra squeaky today. Okay, question 3. Now, this is one of the ones that we did in class in terms of hey, there's prices and quantities. How do you find real GDP? There's no deflator. Freak out a little bit. This is one of the ways to find GDP that's not always listed as a formula. You have to understand it. Oh, sorry. We got an email from your psych teacher about new details and tips for the rest of your exams. One of the things they told us was to not take pictures from your phone. So what should you do? So should we still write our responses? That's interesting, Parker. Let me see. Did I get any emails about anything like that? Because I haven't seen any problems with it, really, when it comes to submitting a picture from your phone. Because now for psych, you probably don't need to, because I don't think there's any reason why you would have to type anything for psych. There's no math in psych. So I would assume that, let me see, that wouldn't be a problem. Let me see. No, I don't see anything from College Board that makes me think that you shouldn't just take a picture with your phone. I've seen no issues on any of the boards that I'm on when it comes to submissions via a picture on your phone. I've seen problems with people submitting and attaching stuff, but that's just more of a computer, that's more of an internet problem than a phone problem, typically. And I think the problem people have is a lot of people want to take the exam on their computer and then write it, and then take a picture with their phone, and they're like, wait a minute, how do I get it from here to my computer? And your answers would be either your Google Drive. Yeah, if you can forward me that email, Parker, that'd be great, because I'll read through that and see, because I haven't had anything from College Board that makes me think, hey, we shouldn't just do that, because when you guys did the calculus exam yesterday, I'm assuming most of you hand wrote your responses for calculus. Or 2 days ago was calculus. I assume most of you hand wrote your responses for calc, because why would you type math? So for this exam, I would still say that. Now for psych, it would make sense for them to just handwrite it, but I'll read that email live on stream and just double check and see if there's anything there. But thanks, Parker, appreciate it. So for this problem, we've got price of apples in year 1 and year 2. We've got quantity of apples in year 1 and year 2. We've got price of oranges year 1, year 2. We've got quantity of oranges year 1, year 2. It's asking for nominal GDP. Okay, well, one of the ways to find nominal GDP is simply take the price of the goods times the quantity, and that'll get you it. Now you have to do that for each good and then add them both up. So for year 1, it says for year 2, so I'm just going to do year 2's. For year 2, 6 times 10 plus 5 times 20 this would be 160. Now again, I did price times quantity for each of the goods because it doesn't really make sense to do 6 plus 5 times 10 times plus 20. That seems kind of off. Yeah, I wouldn't do that. You do it for each good individually. Price times quantity of this good, price times quantity of this good, then you total it up. It's gross domestic product. If you don't know what gross means, gross is always a total. It's a total dollar value of all the goods that are produced in an economy. So 160. Okay, using year 1 as the base year, calculate the real GDP. Now, this is the thing that got us stuck in class a lot. There were a couple of problems that I sent out to you guys where you're like, how the hell do I find it? There's no deflator. Price base year times quantity current year. This is the thing that always got us, was like, what the hell do I do? You do this. Take the price of the good in the base year, multiply it by the quantity of the good in the current year. Trying to find what the GDP for year 2 would be if it had the same prices as year 1, because that's the real GDP. It's like, hey, assuming that prices hadn't changed, what was our actual GDP? Oh, okay. Well, 4 times 10 is 40. And 10 times 20 is 200. So this is 240. Now, when I see this should make me feel pretty comfortable. When I see 160 and 240 together, I should feel comfortable. Why? Because I know without a calculator, the math involving these two numbers will be relatively doable. They have some very easy common denominator stuff, right? Like, I know both of these are divisible by 2. I know they're both divisible by 8. Like, that, they're both divisible. This one's divisible by 3. Like, there's some stuff that I know off of these that are like, okay, I know 16 and 24 pretty well as numbers. So 160 and 240 are like relatively doable when it comes to math. Calculate the GDP deflator. Okay, now this formula, there's only one formula for GDP deflator. That is nominal over real times 100. 160 over 240 times 100. Which is why I was saying, oh, thank God, these are the numbers that I got, that they're numbers that are very easy to do. Because then you just get 16 over 24, which is 2/3. And 2/3 times 100 is 66.7 or 66.6 repeating or whatever. Any of that would be my answer. My GDP deflator is 66 and 2/3. Means that prices actually went down over that time period. If your GDP deflator is 100, that is like your base year one, that means nothing has changed. If it's above 100, means prices went up. If it's below 100, means prices went down. Which, if we look at it, you're like, no, prices went from 4 to 6. And it's like, well, prices went from 10 down to 5. So that's kind of a big jump. It's a bigger jump than this one was. And they sold a lot more of these, so it did go down. Okay, Parker sent it to me. I'm going to check that email really quickly. See if there's anything crazy going on. Tech tips for 2020 AP exam. No, that doesn't seem. I mean, like, yes. You can attach a picture, though. There was no problems with attaching a picture on your thing. Like, even in the College Board emails, they're saying, yeah, you can use your phone to take a picture and submit. That's fine. So I don't know why they're putting this in this email. I'm not sure why they're saying that. The Grammarly thing is accurate. You're not supposed to have Grammarly. You can absolutely attach files. It's just you can't attach. People are attaching like shareable links to their Google Docs. That's the problem. You need to like save your Google Doc as a Word document or as a PDF if you're going to do it. You need to update your browser, but that was a lot of the stuff was stuff I touched on in my video. So no. I mean, like, can you avoid it? Sure, but realistically, you guys should all be handwriting your answers, and outside of that, you're going to take a picture of it, right? Like, how else do you submit a handwritten thing? There's no way to do it other than take a picture of it with your phone. If you type it and cut and paste it, that's fine, but like, there's no other way to submit it than to upload a picture. If you want to cut and paste it onto a document, yeah, I guess you could do that, but they said it was fine if you just submitted a picture. So I don't see an issue with that. Like when I was if I'm reading everything correctly and I saw like 99% of students have had literally no problem submitting their answers, well, if we weren't allowed to upload pictures from our phones, there would have been a much higher percentage, because at no point in any of the College Board stuff did they say that you couldn't just upload a picture from your phone. In fact, they said that you could. So I don't know what AP Psych's reading, but that ain't accurate. And that's not from the district. That's from just AP Psych. So no, you should still be able to submit pictures. That shouldn't be a problem. Okay. Assuming the market basket is composed of the quantities in year one, calculate the consumer price index for year two. Let me turn on my fan because it's getting warm in my room. So assume the market basket is composed of the quantities in year one, calculate the consumer price index for year two. So the CPI, the consumer price index, is based on one thing and one thing alone. The CPI formula is equals price of my market basket. Let me make sure I have this right, because I believe it's current year over base year, but I need to make sure that, because this is a formula that even I don't use a lot. Yeah, it's price market basket current year over base year. Yeah, I never want to say the wrong thing on that one, because it's one that isn't always listed. Over price market basket base year. Yeah. Imagine all the abbreviations here. Yeah, okay. So it's the price of market basket in the current year over the price of the market basket in the base year times 100. Here's the part that's tricky. What the hell is a market basket? A market basket is a dollar value of a bunch of goods and services that are sold in a given year in an economy, which are like, what the heck? Well, it tells you here the market basket is composed of the quantities of the goods in year one. So this market basket has 15 apples and 4 oranges. That's what they're telling me, because they're saying that these are the only two things this country produces. And the market basket has the quantities from year one. So 15 apples, 4 oranges, that's the quantity. Okay, well, what's the price of my market basket in my current year? 4 times 15 plus 10 times 4. 4 times 15 is 60, 10 times 4 is 40, so for my CPI formula, the top half of that should be 100. And again, I found that by using the quantities in this year times those prices, because what's the price of the market basket in, oh sorry, that's the base year. My fault. Yeah, current year is year 2, base year is year 1. So I found the denominator. The denominator is 100. My fault. Sorry, I just realized it when I said that the base year is year 1. So my base year is year 1, so 4 times 15, 10 times 4. So the denominator here is 100. And then for year 2, I'm still using year 1's quantities because that's still the market basket. I'm going to multiply it by the price in year 2. So I'm doing kind of the opposite of what I was doing here. I'm doing this. 6 times 15, 5 times 4. 6 times 15 is 90. 5 times 4 is 20. So this is 110. Let me double check my math on that. 6 times 15 is, yeah, that's 90. And then 5 times 4 is 20, so yeah, 110. So I should get 110 over 100 times 100. So my CPI should just be 110. And then for E, suppose apple and orange pickers received a 2% increase in your wages. Based on your answer to part D, would the real wages have gone up, gone down, or stayed the same? So they're asking, okay, based on the CPI being 110, are these people better off, worse off, or not the same? Well, what matters there is inflation rate. Inflation rate equals the CPI of year 2, or GDP deflator, actually either would work. But it's saying based on my answer to part D. Year 2 minus year 1 over year 1 times 100. Sorry. My CPI in year 2 was 110, in year 1 is 100. So 110 minus 100 over 100 times 100. These two would cancel. So it's just 10% inflation, which allows me to answer this problem now. Prices have gone up by 10%. They're getting paid 2% more. Their real wages have gone down. The real wages have gone down because their wages did not keep up with inflation. Everything is 10% more expensive based on the CPI, but they're only getting paid 2% more than before. Now, this also shows you that the CPI and the GDP deflator are not going to be the same all the time. They are found different ways. One is built around the price, one is built around the actual market basket. So that thing will mess with stuff because the amount of things produced changed quite a bit in these 2 years. So that market basket thing was going to throw off our numbers a decent amount. But they said based on the answer to part D, 110, what happened? Well, okay, based on part D, 10% increase, that's going to decrease their thing. So for D and E, I can understand some problems because the CPI formula is something that people tend to forget, and you're like, how the hell do I find a market basket here? You find it based on what they told you. They said that it's the quantities in year 1s, meaning the market basket is literally 15 apples and 4 oranges. If that's the case, the price of it in my base year, which is year 1, was 4 times 15, 10 times 4, because that's how many, that's the price of those goods times those goods. My price on the market basket in my base year, I'd use my base year's, or sorry, my current year, use my current year's prices times my base year's quantities. So a little different way of solving for that stuff. Tricky stuff. The CPI stuff can be kind of complicated like that. What you need to understand is this part. I think this is more important. If your CPI is 110, that means from your base year you've had 10% inflation. If your CPI is 140, it means since your base year you've had 40% inflation. That was the whole point of CPI, was that it would let you figure out inflation rate relatively easily. You could also do this formula for GDP deflators if they asked you to. They didn't. They said you based on your answer to part D, not part C, so don't worry about it there. But you could do this with your GDP deflators, and you would have found out something very different. And question 4. It's the last one. I got to relog in. That's how long that took. That question took so long I have to relog into the account. Well, that plus the distraction of having to go over that thing. Yeah, the psych teachers sending that out, I don't know why they did. Because I have gotten, if that was an issue, College Board would have emailed us. And students are absolutely allowed to attach pictures. That is not a problem. The problem is maybe they were having problems doing it because they were taking it on their computer and they took the picture on their phone. And they're like, how do I get it from point A to point B? That would be like what I assume the issue was. That's like, well, that's why I recommend taking the exam on your phone. If you, like, because what AP College Board was saying was you can take the exam on your phone. That is only useful for two things. One, if you were to write your answers in like the Notes app, which you could do, they said you could do, and then attach a Notes app file, which is super weird. Or if you were going to take a picture of your written version, it would make the most sense to be logged in on your phone, take a picture of it, and attach that photo. Now, if you want to be safe and take a picture of it and then like copy that image onto a Word document and attach the Word document, I mean, okay. That seems like it's going to cause more problems than not, though. Okay, question 4. So we got a whole freaking bunch of stuff in here. This is like the first one, and then they give me a data table. The problem is they give me a whole bunch of crap. I see consumer spending. I know that counts for GDP. Cool. Oh, God. I see employee compensation. That's like wages, which does count in GDP from a different perspective. If you do the income approach, that would work. So I'm going to use blue for this. I'm going to use red for the normal way we find GDP. I'm going to use blue for the, you could also do it this way, but I don't know why you would, approach, which is the income approach. Government spending, totally fine. Investment spending, totally fine. Net exports, totally fine. Done. Could also do this. Saving doesn't count. The income approach is like wages plus interest plus profit plus rent is the income approach. You can also do it that way. I really wouldn't. That seems like a pain in the butt. What you'll find out is if you add up all the red or add up all the blue, you get the same answer. So there's two ways to solve this one. If I'm going to do it the red way, it's 1,000 plus 400 plus 300 minus 100. So this is 1,000 plus 600, which would be 1,600. No, I should do that in red first. And I'll prove to you that it's the same thing. If I do it in blue, it's 1,100 plus 125 plus 200 plus 175. 125 plus 175 is 300. 300 plus 200 is 500. 500 plus 1,100 is 1,600. So you would have got the same answer either way, as long as you realize to not do them both at the same time, which, boo. And also, no matter what, don't include savings, because savings don't count for GDP. So 1,600 or 1,600, either way you get the same answer. If you just stuck to what we know, just CIGXN, as long as you know what those things stand for, because this could have confused you if you forgot that I stands for investment. CIGXN, done, no problems. Okay? Now this one asked the question of what I did here. Explain why the income approach for calculating GDP yields the same value as the expenditure approach for doing it. This is based on one thing and one thing alone that you're going to think that you've forgotten, I bet. And that is the circular flow model. I actually referenced it as part of a thing that you should have or could have explained. In case you forgot, the circular flow model was something we did like the very beginning of the class, like first or second week, where it was basically in a circle. You had households and firms, you had the factor market and the product market. The basic idea is we buy products from businesses and they buy resources like our labor from us, and the same money is going around all the time. The same money that I spend on goods, businesses then turn around and pay me with. What that model really means is that every dollar spent is a dollar earned. When you spend money, the business then makes that money and they can spend it themselves. So there's this constant circle of money in our economy. That's why these two are the same, because whenever you spend money, that is income for somebody else, and therefore counts as income and would count the same for GDP. So that's why you could do either. It's because of the circular flow model. Explain one difference between the CPI and the GDP deflator. Now, we got different answers last time, so that should tell you that they're two different things. They're not numerically the same. There is a big difference. The logical difference is the consumer price index is built around the price of a market basket, which is not everything in your economy. It's a select amount of goods. It's a select number of goods. It's I think a total of 8,000 different goods are in the market basket right now. That's not every good in our economy. That's not every good that counts towards GDP. So one difference of note, like the biggest difference in it, is that the GDP deflator includes everything in GDP. So if it counts towards GDP, its price matters for the GDP deflator. The CPI is a consumer price index. It is meant to tell us how much inflation consumers are experiencing, because the market basket is a bunch of stuff that me and you buy. So what that means is that the CPI is geared mostly around just this. It's telling us, okay, how much inflation are these people experiencing? Whereas the GDP deflator includes all of that. It includes this as well as these things too, because all those parties are a part of our GDP spending. So CPI is a little more narrow, a little more consumer focused, and CPI is more useful for me and you in our daily life because it tells us how much inflation me and you are experiencing. But GDP deflator is generally a better overall health of everything in our economy standpoint because it includes everything that counts in GDP, which is not just stuff that affects consumers. Okay, using the GDP deflator, which if you're wondering, they told us it right here. If you're like, wait, where the hell is GDP deflator? Look, it's there. GDP deflator is 160. Using the GDP deflator, calculate the real GDP for 2018. Okay, well I have its nominal and I have its deflator. This shouldn't be that hard because real equals nominal over deflator times 100. This is all work for D. Put D. Real equals nominal over deflator times 100. My nominal is 1600. My deflator is 160. Holy crap, did that work out? Again, AP exam questions for macro are meant to be done without a calculator, and that includes this year's. So you should be getting mostly fairly doable math. So 1600 over 60 is 110? I think. I'm right on that. Yeah, it should just be 10, right? Am I stupid? Yeah, it's 10. Why was I freaking out about that? 10 times 100 is 1,000. Am I blanking out? Did I mess up this formula? Let me double check. It's nominal over deflator, I want to say. Let me double check it because this seems weird to me. Formula. Nominal over deflator. Yeah. Oh, it might not be a times 100. No, that doesn't make any sense. Oh, no, that's why. That's my real GDP. Ugh, I was scared because I thought I was finding the deflator for a second. And I was like, why is the deflator 1,000? That means prices went up by 900%. No, the real GDP is 1,000. That is fine. Whew, I scared myself because I forgot what I was finding in that one. Sometimes you know too much and it freaks you out. You're like, a deflator should never be 1,000. It's like, oh, it's not the deflator. It's the real GDP. I'm stupid. So the answer is 1,000 on that one. Okay. Whew. I freaked myself out there. My bad. It's like, it's 10. Why is it 10? That doesn't seem right. Oh, because I'm finding the real GDP. Yes. Okay. I have to scroll down here, so I'm going to have to delete everything that I've done so far so that I can scroll down and read the rest of this question. So I apologize. Actually, I'll keep it up for a second, and then I'll come back up. Assume that wheat farmers in country X sold their entire crop of wheat to domestic wheat millers, who sold it to domestic bakeries. If the value of the wheat farmer's sale is 10 million, the value of the wheat miller's sale is 25, and the value of the bakery's sale is 65 million, how much would nominal X's GDP change as a result of that transaction, and explain? I have done this FRQ before for you guys. I think I did it like 6 weeks ago. But this part was always interesting because this part threw me off the first time I read it too, because I was like, holy crap, what the hell are they asking? They're asking about something I mentioned earlier, which is that not everything counts in GDP, right? GDP measures the total dollar value of final goods and services in our economy. What is the final good in that problem? Is it the wheat, or is it what the bakery does with it? It's what the bakery does with it, right? When we talk about a car, we don't talk about okay, the rubber collectors, farmers, whatever, harvesters, the rubber harvesters, when they sell that to the tire company then turns the rubber into tires and sells it to the car company. The car company then puts those tires onto your car and sells it to you. Which part of that transaction counts for GDP? The last part, right? Same thing on this one. Bleeding all of it so that I can actually do it. What counts to GDP? 60. Oh, god dang it. It did the making everything giant again. 65 million. Because it does not include intermediate goods, and this wheat stuff, the wheat miller and the wheat farmer, that's all intermediate. That's all building into this final bakery sale. So 65 million is how much their nominal GDP changes by. And it's because that's the final good. That is the final product. Whereas the other parts are intermediate goods. We don't count those, because if you did, you'd basically counting the stuff twice. Because that 65 million includes the pricing of the wheat and the miller stuff. Like the bakery has to make a profit, so they're paying for those other things. They have to be able to make money off of it. So 65 million is your final actual numerical add-on. Again, it's the final product, so it's the final part of the chain of transactions that counts for GDP, not the initial two parts. I think the car example is a good one, where it's like the rubber farmers / harvesters to the tire company, to the car company, to you. The only part that counts for GDP is when the car company sells the car to you. Right? We don't count the first couple of parts of that, even though those are transactions and there is a dollar value there. It's not the final good. The final good is the car. So that's a component. 65 million is the answer there. Just to confirm it, to make sure that I didn't mess that up, because I need to do that for my own ego. 1600, 1600. Doesn't tell me what the answer to B is, but weird. Part C, one difference is that it's a measure of all goods and services, whereas CPI is measures of only goods bought by consumers. Easy. That's what I mentioned. Part D is 1,000 million, because this was in millions, so that's fine. They usually wouldn't care if you left off the million part. And then part E, multiple ways to explain it. Nominal GDP will increase by 65 because GDP increases only of the final goods and services to avoid double counting. You don't want to count the same thing more than once. 10 million was already included in the final sale of the miller. The 15 of the wheat milling was already included in the final sale, which is 65 million. These are all just different explanations of like the 10 and the 25 were already counted towards that. So yeah, this is what I would have done. Because it only includes final goods and services to avoid double counting, to not count the same thing more than once. Cool. Made sure I did that one right. All right, so those are the 4 FRQs for today. And again, those are mostly math concepts. As long as you got some formulas out of this, that's good. And again, you want to make sure that you jot a lot of these down, because even on my formula sheets, they don't always have every formula, because there's more than one way to solve the problem. Like even if you know the formula, this table could still throw you off, right? This could still freak you out. So you got to know a little more than just the formula. Know what counts in GDP. Know what the different types of unemployment mean. Like, what are these? These do matter. Know the difference between CPI and GDP deflator. That's tricky. They're both price indexes, which are already weird enough, and they give you different inflation rates. Why? Well, one tracks the inflation of what just consumers experience, and one tracks the inflation as every good bought and sold experiences. So one is a little more wholesale, one is a little more narrowed and focused, but it's better for me and you to look at that one. So know those kinds of things in addition to the formulas so that you can explain your work and understand why you're solving a question the way that you're solving it. Okay? Any questions, comments, or concerns about the problems that I've solved today? Parker, that was good stuff in the email. Thanks for letting me know. I don't foresee that being an issue because I've gotten nothing from College Board stating that that is a thing we should be doing. I've seen nothing from there. I can double check the PowerPoint that's sent out, but I don't think anything matters there. That's my Discord for D&D. I'm trying to think of anything else that should cover it. For tomorrow, we're going over the practices from this week. So the homework assignments you've been given, which were geared around units 1, 2, and 3 in my course, which is really the stuff I've gone over the last 2 days in the video. Okay, these 2 subject matters are really the big things that are focused on in those FRQs and that multiple choice question set. So double check that information, double check those notes, and I will help you with that stuff tomorrow. Any questions, comments, or concern? Don't have Zion in the chat, Kenneth. I'm not sure what's happening there. Is she taking computer science or chem? Archie, come here. I can hear you. Yes. One more time for the camera. Good boy. I have to say goodbye to all the kids. Stop licking my legs again. It's just like yesterday. Good boy. All right. Thanks everybody for watching. Appreciate it, Nick. Thanks for swinging in. Austin, Kenneth, Lindsay, Parker. Thanks for tuning in like a lot. It's super cool that you guys do that all the time. Appreciate it. Anyone who watches this after the fact, thank you for watching this after the fact. It is good to know that you guys are still trying to pass this exam. Matters. Cool.